An unwelcomed Christmas gift. We spent every Christmas with Granny in Pine Bluff. She was short like me and wore faded dresses that she bought way before I was born. Her hair was the color of buttermilk, and that was her drink too, rich and comforting. When we arrived on Christmas Eve, we put up the tree and strung popcorn chains with cranberries on the pine branches. Judy's boyfriend stopped by to help, though she told Mother and Daddy he was her friend, not her boyfriend. I thought Robert Lawrence was as goofy looking as he'd seemed in his picture, but he kept smiling at my sister and she kept grinning back. So I guess he was okay. Daddy had bought Granny a TV for Christmas. She hadn't had one before. Don't need one either. You shouldn't have spent the money, is what she said. But after dinner, she was the one who said, well, as long as that contraption's here, you might as well set it up. So while Mother and Judy and I hung the stockings, David and Daddy unwrapped and positioned the new set. We all sat down with a cup of hot chocolate and a bowl of roasted chestnuts to watch the 10 o'clock news. The weatherman was just starting his report. Now, tonight, we've got something extra special on the radar, he said, a twinkle in his eye. It seems to be a man on a sled being pulled by reindeers. He paused for a moment, examining his screen. Yes, sir, said the weatherman, grinning. I do believe Santa Claus is on his way. Granny laughed so hard I was afraid her false teeth would fall out. After the news, Judy and I went up to her room. There were 2 twin beds and a small desk where Judy did her homework. Even though we were in the same room, I could feel the distance between us. Which bed should I take? I asked. You can have the one by the window, said Judy. I sat down on the worn quilt. There was a large chestnut tree just outside the window. Did Granny get the chestnuts from the tree? I asked. Judy didn't respond. When I turned to look at her, I realized she was already asleep. I could never sleep on Christmas Eve, so I sat up and gazed at the moon and stars through the branches. Even though I knew I was too old, I kept hoping to see Santa. I didn't feel tired at all, but I guess at some point I must have put my head on the pillow because a moment later Judy was shaking me awake. Merry Christmas, Marley! I smiled back. Merry Christmas, Judy. I put on my robe and followed her down the stairs. Daddy stood at the bottom, leaning against the railing and sipping a cup of coffee. There you girls are. He winked at me and said, I think Santa might have left you something. There were oranges and walnuts in my stockings. Judy and I each got new socks and a new sweater, cashmere. Mine was pink and hers was green, and I got a copy of the new Buddy Holly album. That'll be the day. I was just going to ask to use Granny's record player when Daddy cleared his throat and said, I believe there's one more present no one has opened. I glanced around the room. I didn't see any unopened boxes. Where? You have to find it, said Daddy. Who's it for? Asked Judy. All of us, said Daddy. Judy and David started searching then. Looking in corners and boxes under scraps of paper, I sat still for a minute and watched Daddy. He kept glancing at the tree. I went over and looked between the glass balls and the popcorn chains for an ornament we hadn't hung there the day before. It only took me a minute to find it, a small wooden airplane, hand-carved with a note taped to the tail. Marley's found it, exclaimed Daddy. Everyone crowded around me. What does it say? Asked David. I unfolded the note and cleared my throat. This entitles the Nesbitt family to one airplane ride from Pine Bluff to Little Rock. An airplane ride? Mother asked. Oh, Daddy, Judy exclaimed, racing over to give him a big hug. How exciting! Wow, said David. An airplane ride? I repeated Mother's words. Daddy picked up the small wooden plane and made it soar through the air, like a little boy playing with a toy. Flight is one of the modern miracles. Why, I tell you, there is nothing like soaring high over the trees like a bird. Flying meant we'd be high in the air, looking down, kind of like standing on the top of the high dive. And that was not an experience I wanted to have again. An airplane ride is expensive, said Mother. We usually buy the children's savings bonds. Thought we needed something a little more exciting this year, said Daddy. Are you going to come with us? Judy asked Daddy. Nah, I've already been up in the airplane twice. Besides, somebody's got to drive the car back to Little Rock. How about Granny? Asked David. You want to come along? Granny shook her head. I remember the first time I rode in an automobile. Seemed unnatural to move across the ground so quickly. But flying? No, thank you. I'm not a bird, and I'm keeping my 2 feet firmly on the ground. Then she smiled sheepishly. Besides, I want to stay home and watch my new TV. Everyone laughed. Then, everyone except me. I was longing for a savings bond.